Well, hello and welcome to our 42nd episode of the Gutenberg Changelog podcast. In today's episode, we will talk about full-site editing scope for WordPress 5.8, the 10.4 Gutenberg release, the query quest, and also the gallery block refactor. My name is Birgit Pauli-Haag. I'm the curator at the Gutenberg Times, and I'm here with Grzegorz Ziolkowski, JavaScript developer at Automatic and WordPress contributor. Hello, Grzegorz. How are you? And how is life in the Gutenberg fast lane?
Hello, Birgit. I'm great. Busy as a bee. There's a lot happening, especially in the last 2 weeks, because of the decision around WordPress 5.8 release.
You're right. I actually interrupted my break from Gutenberg Times, my move break, last Saturday, where I did a tiny newsletter to at least have some of the things go out. Yeah, but I'm back. My office is now almost boxes free. So it's a win, and I celebrate all the little wins. Speaking of that, we received an interesting question from listeners of the Japanese Gutenberg podcast called Gutenberg Freaks. A big thank you to Akira Tachibana to relay the question. And Akira is the team rep for Help Hub on the documentation team. Well, he's actually my boss. And then he tweeted, in this Japanese Gutenberg podcast, they are chatting about how to pronounce your names, Birgit and Grzegorz. Also the recommendation to changelog your enthusiasm to Gutenberg documentation. So greetings to the Japanese hosts and listeners of the Gutenberg Freaks, and a big thank you for the recommendation. I'm sure you're not the only ones puzzled by the pronunciations of our names. So I start. My name is a composite of beer, as in German beer, and Git, as in GitHub. Beer Git, developer's delight, actually. So, Grzegorz, how can you help people learn how to pronounce your name?
First, sending big hugs to our fellow podcasters from Gutenberg Freaks in Japan. This is really cool. So I will get inspired by you, Birgit. And I also wanted to have something similar, an incredible mix of beer and Git. So I tried to decompose name using only familiar English sounds. So what I got is something like this: G from Gutenberg, She like Sherlock, and Gosh. So that gives you Grzegorz.
Yes.
Yeah, and we will have the link to my website when I'm pronouncing my name and surname, and also we'll give the reference to the podcast and to the show when you discuss that.
Yes, excellent. So now you know. And this is also a good reminder to ask our listeners to head over to Stitcher or iTunes or any other podcast apps on your favor to write a review of the show. We had a few reviews early last year, but then we didn't ask for any more. So we will ramp that up again. And we had this also method that any review that we get, we actually read aloud here and give you a shout out. So head on over and let us know what you think about our show. It doesn't have to be a 5-star review. So just to kind of, we love them and we are very happy about that. We can take criticism.
Yeah, in other show they give 6-star reviews, so you can go also for that.
Nice. Yeah, and so the big news for this week is that Josepha announced that the go, no-go decision on the scope for WordPress 5.8 release was made this week. In a meeting with Matt Mullenweg, Josepha Hayden-Chamfossy, Helen Hu-Sandy, Matthias Ventura, and Hector Pietro, they come together and Matthias demoed the current state of the development of the various components for phase 2. And Josepha then afterwards published a follow-up post, and with the video of the meeting, which is about 90 minutes, and also the outcomes. And so we learned the following at that. So what will be in 5.8, all the improvements for Gutenberg 9.9 to 10.7. We are now at 10.4, so 3 more to come, plugin releases. It will introduce the new site theme blocks, which is a query block, a site logo block, a navigation block, the site tagline, in total about 20 of them. And then it will also introduce the theme JSON mechanism for block-based themes, but it will not have yet show up as an interface for the user to use. For the user to use is only the page template editor to create templates for pages and posts that also show up in the drop-down list in the post or page editor. So to introduce that gradually, because there is a whole new concept around templates for users, the content creators, or those who have access to templates. And there's a unanimous kind of idea that introducing the full site editor, even if it were ready at one time, would overwhelm a lot of people. And doing it this way, it would introduce only pieces of it, but then prepare people for the larger release of the site editor that will come in December. The difference between the page editor and the December release is also the time frame, as I understood it, where extenders like plugin developers, especially theme developers, can prepare themselves to actually create block-based themes that are based on the theme JSON mechanism and the global styles, but it's not yet part of the interface. And then there were two things. The widget screen and the blog widget and customizer is probably ready for release by that time. And Matthias did some great demonstrations there. And there also will be some design tools like duotone, layout controls for padding and assignment. And we will certainly talk about this later in the year some more. So Grzegorz.
Yeah, there's one thing I wanted to highlight is
Mhm.
pattern directory. So they discussed that for start, there will be a way on the WordPress.org website, you will be able to build, like to browse the patterns that will be submitted. But for start, you will have to copy the code and pass that into your website to get this pattern. Later, they will discover some more advanced techniques. So probably that will be similar to how block directory integrates with the inserter. So I hope that would be next step, that you would be able to install a block pattern directly during editing your website. So
Yeah, so do you have
definitely, yeah, I think that's the plan is looking really great. Matthias mentioned that those new blocks that are added, in his opinion, could be something that would make a great single major release of WordPress. So that just shows how many new features are included. So not only that, but also so many technical aspects, technical APIs that need to be exercised by the extenders you mentioned. So I think that the way it's scheduled is really good for the community. It gives a lot of time, and the fact that everything is maybe not most of the things is optional, and that is really nice. And also one thing that was discussed, that some of those new blocks, they don't look perfect from the user experience perspective. They are fully functional and they won't break, but they consider that there could be added some sort of label, like they mentioned first beta, and they discuss that could be something like, what was the name, laboratory, like,
lab? Yeah,
some
yeah,
lab, yeah,
yeah,
something
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, I liked when Matt said, "Well, can't we have something like that's more than beta, but the kind of dragons? You will meet some dragons." That was a yeah. It's a very interesting video to watch, as it's more collaborative, and it's the questions that are asked back and forth on the team. So quite a few people already watched it and they were very positive about it. So we, of course, will have the link in the show notes. I think having the developer first APIs in a release before the users get to use all of it is part of the learned lessons from the WordPress 5.0 release, where everything appeared and the plugin developers or theme developers didn't have enough time to test things in core. And this is now doing it the other way around and saying, okay, for the users, it's all opt-in, and the extenders can now get everything for testing or what they need in core, even if it's not visible yet.
Yeah, and definitely the template editor feature, which is something that's designed especially for non-block based themes. This is something that will allow people to experiment with the full site editing, but limited to only one single page. So that is very powerful. And in my opinion, that's the most exciting part of this release combined with new blocks.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So a couple of weeks ago, Josefa also published that to narrow down the scope for the user to saying you will be able to she thinks for an MVP kind of thing is to have a single landing page. And landing page is what a lot of content creators actually do all day, is creating single pages, sales pages, or registration pages for events or something like that. And they only need one template for that, or multiple templates, but they don't need to change a lot of other things on the site. So it's good to start out with that, with a good use case that gets a lot of exposure, but also with a narrowed down scope, so people don't get lost in the weeds. Yeah. Coming to the community contributions, if anyone ever needs to catch up on all things full site editing, because you wanted to wait till it's actually in core and it's coming, Anne McCarthy gave a great presentation last night that's on April 15th at the Mega Meetup, and it was pre-recorded and it's available on YouTube. And it covers in less than 30 minutes all components of full site editing, the full site editing outreach program that she runs. And she also discussed a few of the outcomes that come from the 4 calls for testing. And after Anne's presentations, there were great questions back and forth in the audience. It was a great meetup. And then Marcus Kazmierczak was brave enough to do live demo of some of the screens that will come to the 5.8 release, and also answered some audience question. And he actually demonstrated the template editor that will come. He didn't use a classic theme. He used a block-based theme, but it was a great presentation, and he had some great notes as well there. So once the video and the links from the shared links from the Mega Meetup are available, we'll also put them in the show notes. Big shout out to the hosts, David Bissett and John Felismi, as well as Guy Ciccinelli, for a well-run meetup, despite the technology hiccups that meetup.com had to offer and delayed the start of it. It was a great, I think there were about 150 people in there, so it was well attended, and I think it will be even more attended after the fact on demand. So
it sounds like a great meetup to watch the recording. I'm personally interested now to see what Marcus did during the live presentation. He is also doing some Twitch sessions when he is trying to build a full site editing theme from scratch. Mm-hmm. So maybe we'll include the link to his Twitch account so people could check that out. And also the 30 minutes to show the most important features of full site editing it's impossible. I don't believe that it happened.
Yeah, and when we definitely link Marcus's Twitch account, as well as Helen Husseini also did a 3-hour Twitch stream on and learning about block-based theme and how to build one. So you can get 2 things about the same thing, and both are great teachers and learning how their mind works when they learn something new. It's definitely interesting. Mark also has a series of posts on his blog about building blocks. So we will also link that in the show notes. Speaking of testing, the community is called upon the fifth test of the site editor. And Anne McCarthy published a query quest for you to test the query block. And Matthias, or the whole group that was in the demonstration from Matthias, agreed that query block is not something that should be in the hands of users. It's something that theme developers are definitely working with. But right now, they don't have a better name for it. If you have ideas on how to name the query block, the loop block, or something like that, all these technical terms, query or loop, are only for developers, and we all know what they mean, but it's hard to create that concept in the minds of a user that does not work with code. So if you have any suggestions there, have at it. Send them in via email or reply on Twitter or something like that. So
Yeah,
testing,
it's
query
very
testing.
hard to come up with a good name for the query block. It's so in DNA of developers that it's hard to wrap your head around something different.
Right. We know a few patterns of that from the widget blocks, right? It's the latest post block is pretty much a query block. And so is the archive block. So maybe having block variations that have names and not have the parent block kind of appear in the inserter and refactor those archives and
Now that
latest
you
post blocks.
told now that you told me that, so one thing that was discussed during the development process is that we could refactor those latest post and archive blocks to use query internally, although it won't happen soon, but in the future it might be because it's exactly the same concept.
Yeah, and it would really help to also get it into the interface, because then the settings that are in the sidebar for both of them can then be replicated in the other in the overall query block, also for custom post types and in that area. So yeah, glad we talked about it.
Okay, so now we can switch to the some more interesting stuff that has actually happened. So this week we have a minor WordPress release, and it also included a security patches, and it's WordPress 5.7.1 release. And there was several bug fixes for the block editor. We counted 8 of them, and those are something quite important, but they are very specific use cases that were reported after the major release, and they were fixed. There was also one security release for the latest post block, and it was all the patches were backported also for previous releases, so it's now secure in that regard. It was about password protection for password protected post that could show up in the latest post block. And we also had Gutenberg 10.4 release, and this one was also quite big, not as big as the last one, but still like the number of enhancement, which is at 31, is very impressive. And I wanted to start with the efforts that Ben Dwyer is leading to bring the block styles parity between the front end and the editor. So some of the blogs, they didn't look exactly the same between the what the users see when browsing the page when you are editing, and it's got a lot of improvement. So some of the blogs that were updated are archives blog, latest comments blog, quote separator, and in the past, probably like earlier, there were more blogs like that. So you can expect that in the major release, all of those, this experience will align greatly, which is a great improvement in my opinion. And so one nice improvement is for the publishing flow. So now when you are about to click the publish button, you will see the site icon, the name of the site, and the URL. So that's like a nice way of showing what you are actually changing, especially if you are using multi-site. And there were several iterations to the list view. So now you have like they improve the way the items are focused when you are navigating on in the sidebar, and when you are moving with the mouse or with the keyboard, it better highlights items both in the sidebar and in the canvas of the block editor. And there is also special way of highlighting template parts, so header and footer, they look differently. So I find it very interesting because it better presents the way the site is structured.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think it's like one of the hidden features, the list view. People know it about, oh, it's a block navigator. I think was the first name of that feature, and it's now called list view, just to catch people up what we are talking about. So one comment also for the Ensure front end and blocks editor kind of look the same. There was one of the discussions from the tests on the full site editing was about preview. And that has a lot to do with that, because in the block editor, when you do a post, you have the preview and then see in a separate tab. That goes away in the site editor. And there is a back and forth in an issue how that would solve. And Anne McCarthy pointed out that that's actually not a missing feature, it's a symptom of something else. And that is that there is no parity yet, or trust in the parity of front-end blocks and how they look on the front end and how they look in the editor. And that is definitely a focus that people would need solved by the time when the site editor goes into core. So that's something that the team is also working on. And this is the smallest atomic view on it right now.
yeah, in fact, it required a lot of changes in how the styles are ordered in the editor. So there was a lot of work to make sure, and also to better reset defaults, because WP admin brings its own set of challenges.
Yeah, yeah. And you also want to make it easier for theme developers to then, when they add additional styles to it, that they also can replicate that in the editor. And that has always also been a big hurdle for theme developers right now. So yeah, that's a great effort.
Yeah, there is also a new feature. I mean, this feature existed before. So now there is a way to revert your changes applied to the template and go back to the original one, the one that was exposed by the theme author. And this one you will find in the header. And when you click on the drop down menu from the name of that is next to the name of your template, and there will be a button, new button, that allows you to revert to the defaults. And what was
It's
the
a
name
big
of the
saver.
button? Yeah, the
Especially.
button is called Clear Customizations at the moment. There was changes applied to the pre-formatted block, so now you can use color controls there. As
Yes.
always, it's a nice improvement, and I expect that we will see color in most of the blocks by the time of the major release of WordPress. And there was also some technical change for the query block, and it now uses a WordPress loop, which is a WP query class for the query block. And as I understand that, it gives more power to developers how this block will behave.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really powerful class there in PHP. So the were also 25 bug fixes in the Gutenberg 10.4 release. And one of them is that the inserter only shows the patterns that are in use for the allowed blocks in the canvas. The block library per se, quite a few blocks got some additional love there or fixes. For instance, the buttons block, it now prevents the overlapping of button blocks on the front end, prevents having a column width bigger than 100. And that was, in some themes, I had a problem that when you showed a column block with a full width, you were not able to handle the rest of it. So because you didn't see all of it. And then in the gallery, there was a bug that added all media items to the gallery, again, using the external URLs. And then the bug for the image block, it now preserves the custom size of the image placed in the block editor when you replace the image. Yeah, that's one of the things that needs to be tracked down multiple times, because sometimes that's a regression from previous or it's new features that all of a sudden don't come over when you replace the image because it doesn't remember. And fixing that is definitely a good thing. I appreciate it, definitely. And then
Yeah,
there are,
this is,
mhm.
yeah, I want to say that this is because we are using the media library that existed before. So this requires integration between two systems. And it's always hard to do. And most of those bugs exist because of the integration isn't so smooth as it should be. Yeah. But
Yeah,
it's improving a lot. And I think we applied a lot of changes on both sides to make the process more streamlined.
yeah, I think integrating with a long-standing system, there needs to be a lot of knowledge transfer in terms of how things work, and you only find it through bugs. Somebody reports, "Oh, this is my expectations," and then this didn't happen, and then all of a sudden, "Oh, yeah, I didn't think about that." Yeah, kind of. Just looking through the list of bug fixes, if something stands out, but most of them are really.
Yeah, so
Um,
there was one bug that actually I
mhm,
introduced, but it was quite interesting. So the change that was landed before was that when you are using block autocompleter, the slash inserter command, in the past you would be able to use only one word, and the change was that you could use multiple words. It's especially important as you have a list of new blocks that will arrive soon, so finding a block is getting harder. And but there was an interesting side effect for the user autocompletion. This would continue to match the usernames even when you don't care about autocompletion anymore. So there are some now special handlers that prevent from that, because that was effectively slowing down the post if you were writing a long paragraph and you start like you did the mention at the beginning.
mhm. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, and I think we are through the bug fixes here.
Yes. So we had three API changes, and one is quite important to mention because there were deprecated very low level APIs from WordPress 5.2 removed. And just to make sure, all the authors of three plugins that were identified were contacted, and they are aware. They will update, hopefully they will update their plugins. But if you are a plugin author, you definitely should check out those changes and make sure that there isn't anything that could potentially break your plugin. Although, as I said, those are APIs that we don't expect are popular at all, and they are for a long time not used by anything that is in Gutenberg. And we just do it because we believe that, in contrast to PHP, in JavaScript, every byte matters, because we are serving 40% of the web, so we want to make sure that we provide only the essential features. So yeah,
Yeah.
we should expect that in the future, but it will be always on a smaller scale, just taking into account all the breaking changes, like possibility of breaking changes on a
Hmm. Yeah.
larger scale.
So when you say three authors of the plugins that use the API, that was only the repository. So if
Yes.
the plugin is not in the
Yeah.
repository and uses it, the plugin author definitely needs to. But WordPress 5.2, when was that released? Was it March 2019 or something? I think it
Yeah, I
was,
believe
yeah,
so.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe
So
maybe
it's
a
about
month or two
2 years
later.
now. Hmm.
Yes,
Yeah,
that's why the decision was made.
yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. So nobody should use that after that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and also there was a change in the way block patterns integrate with the query block. So the initial approach was that you define a scope param on the registered block pattern, and by scope you would provide the name of the block, and this would effectively mean that this block pattern would only show up inside the query block. However, the decision was that it is like this is a limitation that prevents from searching for the block pattern in the inserter. So they changed the approach, and now you just provide a block types param when registering a block pattern that just informs that this pattern applies also to this query. And then if you would go and watch the demo with the no go decisions for WordPress 5.8, then you will see they talk a lot about this query block. And this is the thing that we also discussed in the last episode, that allows you to navigate through block patterns for the query block.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for the explanation. I didn't know exactly what it would be when I read this, but that's pretty big, yes. So now we come to the experiments, and there were 23 of them, and most of them cover the navigation editor and the block. But we start out with a very big one, and that's the customizer now also has a widget inserter that is a block inserter pretty much. So the customizer can handle widgets in blocks quite nicely. In the demo that Matthias did on the also this week in the Go No Go meeting, he showed off the inserter, and it actually adds, it opens up when you use the blue plus is known from the block editor as well as from the site editor. When you click on it, there is a sidebar that opens up, and the team now make that available to the customizer as well. And it works quite nicely, quite smooth. And you can add that to, and so you can have all those, the blocks available for the widgets in the customizer. There were also the legacy widget was also added to the customizer. That is the widget block that handles all the backwards compatibility to the existing widgets that are in plugins and in themes already on site. So now you can also manage those in the customizer. This is definitely necessary when it goes into 5.8. So people are not surprised when this lands there.
I guess this is mostly so people don't have to jump between the widgets section and the block editor section, because otherwise that would be two separate places to add widgets.
Right. In the WP admin menu, there's appearances and widgets. That's the widget screen, and that handled blocks already. And actually, Bud Kraus did a nice, from Joy of WP, did a nice 5-minute comparison between those two, the old widget editor screen and the new widget editor screen. And that had been working for quite a while. But the biggest hurdle for the widget screen to actually get into core was that quite a few people, I think most people now, use the customizer to edit their widgets, and it wouldn't work well with that yet. and it seems to be working now. So test it out. And so especially when you are plugin author and or have a lot of plugins in your site, to make sure that the widgets also show on your site and you can edit them. Not a whole lot of people edit that after the initial one, yeah, but after the initial
Mhm.
setup, but some people fiddle with it all the time because they procrastinate on writing or something like that. Yeah, that's about the customizer and the widget, and that's coming along just nicely. So it will be ready for 5.8 unless some really big bug comes out. Navigation editor and block. The navigation, the team has been working on it for now a good year and a half. And I think the backwards compatibility as well as the interface on how to create menus, edit existing menus, and add additional features into the navigation bar, that's still a work in progress. So
Yeah, I think that's a lot of work because you need to cover all the ways you can link content in WordPress. So that's a lot, and you need to convert that into a nice UI. So that's a lot of work.
yeah, and also needs to kind of, yeah, sometimes you need to unlearn things. And how do you teach people the new thing? And I think the user interface is definitely getting there. We talked about the widget editor. Now you can manage the live preview link, and another iteration on the legacy widget block that also is in the widget screen. All right.
So we also have 25 items in the documentation section. So some of the things that I want to talk about is there are now explanations for the template parts and how you can add more details about them in the theme JSON file. And there is also something I was surprised to see, that there is now a practical example of adding a control to the sidebar. I was surprised mostly because I didn't know it doesn't exist, because it's so obvious it should. And
Good.
there was also an interesting clarification what the block wrapper means in the context of building blocks when you are dealing with edit or save methods. So it was clarified that you should use an actual DOM element when you apply the method calls use block props. So it won't work with React related components like fragment from the React, or some higher level components like server side render that people often use to use render callback methods in PHP to produce the output.
Oh, good. Yeah. That
Yes.
clarification gets definitely a good start there.
And there was also a very nice contribution that uh, brought up to date the documentation for the block creation, and in particular for the case when you call npx WordPress create block for the template that is was built specifically for this tutorial. And now everything is aligned, and that's really nice to see it happening finally.
Oh, good. I need to check that out.
Yeah, and there was, as usual, it's quite boring if you know what's going on, that there was several changes. I mean, boring to talk about that there are changes for the types in the documentation. What I mean is TypeScript support. So when you have all those code descriptions, you will have better support and also better integrations with the editors. And on the code quality front, we had 7 PRs merged. I wanted to mention one. So we are actively working on using Prettier tool to format all the files, just to have one styles in all of them. It's especially, we started with YAML scripts, but there are another changes coming in the next release for markdown files. So that will help for the documentation to have one style.
Excellent. Yes.
Yeah, and there's also tools. There are 8 changes. One important change for developers and designers. When you are using now watch mode to develop Gutenberg features. CSS changes will be picked up when you edit something, and you won't have to restart the build, which was the case before. And it was really annoying for those working with CSS styles.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. All right. So this was the changelog for the Gutenberg 10.4 release. I just wanted to also note that there is now also a 10.4.1 release out that fixed three things that were pretty annoying or even produced a white screen of death. So those are fixed. And if you had trouble with that, download the 10.4.1 release and you should be on your way. Now we come to the section on what's active in development or discussed. And you brought something from the blog-based theme meeting notes regarding blog template parts.
Yeah, because I find it very interesting. That's another way to allow people using features from blog based themes without actually using them. So there are now three new methods in PHP that allow you to use template parts with a single function called. So the function is called Gutenberg block template part at the moment. And there are two variations for the header and the footer. So basically, it allows you to call this method in your theme, and you will just render the template part. And another thing that is even more exciting, and we also discussed that, is that you will be able to use a custom template that uses only blocks for the page you are editing. So yeah, we discussed that, so there's nothing more we can cover, but I wanted to highlight it again.
Yeah, it's definitely something to look out for when you are not there yet for the block-based theme, but you want to give your users as a theme developer access to, for instance, the template editor that comes out with 5.8. Here is your coding underbelly, so to speak, the foundation on how to make that. And we definitely make those PRs available in the show notes because they're coming in 10.5, both of them, right?
Yeah, they were already merged, so they
They're
are
already merged.
definitely coming.
Yeah. So, well, if they're already merged, you could actually pick them up through the Gutenberg Nightly version that you also get on the Gutenberg Times. All right. What's also discussed and what I wanted to talk about in the last episode, but it was already so big, was that there's an update on the refactor for the gallery block. And the refactor has the idea to actually use nested image blocks to form the gallery. And Glenn Davis is heading up that effort. And he had posted a call for testing. Yes, another testing call. Yes. We can all do this. But remember the mantra, many eyeballs make all bugs shallow, kind of thing. So the refactored version is now using single image blocks inside the gallery block, and you can use all the great features like the individual links for each image, the block styles like that come with the core editors. You can have rounded corners, or if you have square images, they're actually circles. Very nice for speaker galleries. For the conferences, you can have any choice of sizes or editing, or the editing capability, so you can crop them. And if you use a plugin with your site like the CoBlocks, you can still apply the great filters and the animation that plugin provides. So that I tested that. So that is really a great refactor that's still working. Davis also walks you on his post through the few features and asks to test them, all the many facets of the gallery block. I left a comment on the post with my impressions, and I also did a bug report because that the images, when I applied styling, when I added the gallery block into a group, all the styling will be gone, and I started again. And I also suggested that make it possible to apply the block styles not one at a time. So if I have my 10 speakers of a conference, I don't want to touch every single image and make the rounded corners. I want to select them all and then apply them. I know that's a highly complicated process, but it's definitely something other people would like to. And I also suggested to have to respect the alt text that are attached to an image in the media library, that it comes over when it gets into the gallery, to start out with that. So that made it to the project board. But if you, definitely test it. Justin Tadlock also explains how this new change, Justin Tadlock on the WP Tavern wrote about it, and he explains how this change can make a lot of difference for gallery layouts. Among other ideas, he also pictured that you could actually use a pull quote block as part of a gallery block. So it's some interesting ideas coming down the pipeline here.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention that this idea of nested blocks is something that is constantly reviewed by the Gutenberg core team. In fact, the decision was made before WordPress 5.0 that the quad block wouldn't, in a nested version, wouldn't make to the release, because at that time the user experience wasn't good enough, because this setup is very complex. As you figure out during the testing, there are so many new possibilities that it also creates the friction sometimes, and you expect more because you can do more things, like for the gallery block. When you have nested blocks, you can take an individual image and drag it out of the gallery block and put in a different place, or the other way around. So you can also use movers the same way as you use them in other contexts. So you can use the same interface to change order of the blocks, or which are images at this point. And the next step is, if there is an image, you can also add something else. And so the quad block, there is an open PR. Andres is working on that one, but he's busy now with global style, so it's on hold. So if someone wants to help with that one, we'll leave the link in the show notes. And I know that for the list block, that's also another one that people expect those levels of nesting. This one is much more complex. There are some technical blockers that Ella is actively working to resolve. So I hope that is going to be in active development or moving forward in this year as well. Because in general, I think that the more we use nested blocks for everything, the better it is for the user, because they just get more power and they use more consistent UI.
Yeah, that's a big point, to have the consistent UI, so you can change things as you want to, as you actually do in single blocks, that you also can do it in nested blocks. But they can be really complicated when you have the nested blocks in columns, and it can be quite. So we will share the PRs in the show notes, so you can at least review them, and maybe you want to take on some of them to push over the finish line. I also want to point out, in the next release in 10.4, we will find Gary Pendergast, PR, who includes for the file block an option to show an embed of the PDF file and it's a much nicer and richer experience. It's the only file format that actually has a built-in embed, a view. So I know there were a few plugins out there, but they weren't updated for the last 2 years. So having that in core is definitely beneficial. Although not everybody can open PDFs, especially on mobile, it's still a very frequently used file format to make sure that the white papers are white papers and can be printed. So that's coming to a WordPress install near you. All right, so what's our time right now? We are almost at the hour, I think.
Yes.
But before we end the show, I want to remind you about the query quest we mentioned before, the call for testing. The deadline is May 5th, but somehow it doesn't feel like that's 3 weeks away. So don't procrastinate. It's the most powerful feature, or one of the powerful features that will come to 5.8 is the query block, whatever the name will be. Right now, it's also handled as post list. block or so. And I also wanted to point to a issue that Kjell Rikstad from the theme review team opened, and that is inspirations for query block patterns. I think that most theme developers will be working on the patterns rather than the query block. And there are great examples collected in that issue. And pick one and try out how this works. Yes.
Yeah, and
So, yeah.
this is also a chance to have your contribution if you will just provide a great pattern that will be integrated in the WordPress core, because as I understand, there will be a few for start.
Yeah, they have to. Yeah. Well, so this has been a fully packed show again. Thank you all for hanging out that long until the end, dear listeners. And as always, the show notes will be published on the gutenbergtimes.com/podcast, gutenbergtimes.com/podcast. And if you have questions or suggestions or news you want us to include, send them to changelog@gutenbergtimes.com. That's changelog@gutenbergtimes.com. And I found out that we are all on Twitter. Yeah, Grzegorz is picking up DMs on Twitter as well as I am. So if you happen to be on Twitter and have some ideas, don't hesitate to send us a DM. And thank you, Greg, for all this great information that you brought to the show. Until the next time.
Thank you, Birgit. That was great to talk to you again, and see you all in 2 weeks.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.